Today I'm going to show you how I build a set of bourbon tasting flights out of walnut with a spalted ash inlay. This is the first time I'm using walnut in a project, so I'm a little nervous because I don't want to mess it up. So I make sure I make all my marks as accurate as I can and carefully cut everything to width and length on the table saw and the miter saw. Now that I have my two boards, I want to plane them down to get a nice flat, smooth surface on the top so that I can have it all prepped up and ready to go to start making my inset. I take my piece of ash wood over to the bandsaw and I cut out a small piece so that I can take the W that I want to use for my inlay and cut this out as close as I can to my pencil marks. And then after I get this completely cut out, I'm going to take it over to my bench and use my files to finish the W and get it to its final dimensions. Then I take measurement of the width of the W and find the center on the board, and I come over to the bandsaw and cut the W in half, so now I have two of the exact same parts. I then glue this to the center of the board of walnut and mark around the entire letter with an X-Acto knife so that it cuts all of the different wood fibers around the letter, so I know exactly where I need to cut those edges out of. Then I take the W off and bring the board over to the drill press and use a Fastener bit and a small drill bit to cut out the majority of the wood, and then start using my chisel to get as close up as I can to the edges. And the producer comes over to give me a little bit of help and show me how it's really done.
Okay?
Yeah.
And then what you're going to do is you're going to take off one of these. See this line over here? Don't go past that. You want to just take off a little bit. Push it down. Yep. Do it again. Good.
Daddy, I want to try it by myself.
All right. Good. Don't get outside. Don't get close to that line, okay? Just take off those edges. Nice. Yeah, that was good. A tiny little bit at a time. All right?
Mm-hmm.
And after about 10 or 15 minutes, he decided to let me finish it. I then used a very fine bit in my trim router to get around the really tight edges of the corners and the round parts of the W that I couldn't get with a chisel or any other file that I had. So little by little I take off a small amount of shavings around the edges until that W fits in nice and perfect. And right here you can see I had to super glue a piece of the walnut that I chipped off on the bottom of the W. So after it gets fit in, you don't really see it anymore, which is the nice thing about working with wood. It is a little forgiving if you make a mistake. Then I use my glue to get it around the edges and the bottom, and permanently bind the spalted ash with the walnut. And we get a very nice, snug fit. I then take my planer and plane most of the ash to get it very close to being flush with the walnut. And then I mark where I'm going to put the insets to hold the glasses for the flight. I then mark a nice curve on the top and the bottom of the board because we wanted a slight curvature on the top and the bottom of the flight. So after I drill out the pieces with the Forstner bit, I then come over to the bandsaw and cut those out. And I bring both pieces over to the oscillating sander and sand out most of the marks from the bandsaw. Get it ready for a nice finer sanding. Then I take some walnut sawdust and glue and make a little paste out of that to fill in the space between the ash and the walnut to cover up any gaps. After that glue and dust dry, I get the wonderful satisfaction of sanding it and finding the nice clean spalted ash and what it's going to look like all nice and flush with the walnut. I didn't like the little pinholes that the Forstner bit made, and I decided to take a plug cutter and cut some pieces out of some scrap walnut that I had left, and then put them inside of a clamp and cut them in half because I didn't need them as thick as they were coming out. And then took a matching drill bit and drilled out the void to plug up the holes. So it's just a little bit of glue and those plugs. I fit them in real nice, and they fill those voids up a lot better than using any kind of glue and dust. I didn't like how that came out either. So this seemed like this was my best alternative. And I actually really like how this comes out. After the glue dries, I come over with my chisels and I shave these raised edges down as close as I can before starting to sand. Then I just take a piece of 120 grit sandpaper and sand that nice and flush and smooth. And I come over to my router table and I put a little handle inset in each side of the pieces so that you can grab it easily when the drinks are on there and carry it around. There were still a couple rough areas, so I wanted to take this down a little bit more with an 80 grit sandpaper to get it nice and perfectly smooth any bumps out. I also took a small piece of 120 grit sandpaper and took out any of the sharp edges, and then brought in my orbital sander to start sanding down through all the different grits all the way up to 220. One thing I did forget to actually record was that I put a 45-degree chamfer on the tops of both pieces. And now it's time for finishing. This is one of my favorite things to do after you're finished with a piece, is to just see the grain pop. So for the finishing process I'm using here, it's actually Eric Curtis's mixture of two different types of finishes. His first 3 coats are a Danish oil, a polyurethane, and turpentine mixture. The first 2 coats go on with a cloth, and then the 3rd coat goes on with an abrasive, and then it's a mixture of beeswax, turpentine, and oil that gets put on with an abrasive and then wiped off with a clean cloth. I'll leave a link down in the descriptions below so you can go check out that video. He does a wonderful job of explaining that. Here's the finished product. It came out so nice. I am so happy with this. So first time doing an inlay by hand and I have to say I was actually quite proud of myself with all of this. So it came out really nice, and looks like I have some bourbon to drink. So hopefully you liked the video, and if you did, I would appreciate a thumbs up, and if you'd like to subscribe, you can get my future videos as I make them. Thanks for watching.